Well, feedback. Uh, no, I never have. My entire hike here, guys, I had one comment. One of the weirdest one was I had burnt popcorn for like 20 seconds. Got 115 views on it.
Well, of course, that's, you know, what's your brand? Your brand is crisis, okay? And the burnt popcorn is the crisis.
Not walking the hills enjoying nature.
That's all. That's mundane, you know. Now, if you would sit down and pick, lint out of your belly button, well, that'd be 200-300 views right there. So,
Hey, well, I got 6 views just by turning the toilet. I was asked a question. Said, "Is this how vegan diabetics have done?" Well, I didn't show me actually going to the bathroom.
that's appreciated.
The parent, what is that thing called? This is not a ruling for it's safe for the kids.
Oh yeah, absolutely, kid friendly, yeah.
Now that people say, oh, the liberals and leftists are, can't be anything. I don't know. There's other shutdowns.
Oh, censorship happens happily from the left and the right, and it only has one real intended purpose, and that's to limit discourse. It's not that they really fucking care what you say, all right? They really care less. It's who you say it to. That's where it matters, all right? So yeah, you can go out in your backyard and you can yell all you want. You can't yell on the social media platforms because someone might be listening on the other end. And what could that do? Well, that might interfere with their consumption in some way, shape, or form. That's all it's about. That's all. Believe me, Google doesn't fucking care one way or the other who's in power because they've already bought their position within society. But they do care about what's the tension level, And for example, they didn't censor Trump at the beginning of his little escapade. They censored him at the end. Why? Because his brand was already spent. It's like, no, we've gotten everything we can out of this. Now let's try to move in another direction. Yeah, it was very objectionable what he was involved in, and they do own the platform. They have the right to do it. It's not what he was saying; it's who he was saying it to. And that's what the censorship is all about. And that's why don't they teach that in school? If they did, but they just give you half of that story.
Yeah, with the other things they don't, really explain to that well, we were going to talk about that in high school. By the way, everybody, 2 representatives of the United States. Well, thank you, Mr. Well, hopefully out. Go to the next class. We don't even know it. But there's certain things that should have been discussed in American civic life.
Many things.
For instance, I don't ever feel comfortable when people ask me about Mount Rushmore. There's certain things that you look at and I want to be very useful.
Yeah.
And it's how William Witt made marbles. He went by there, I think it was, looked after a few seconds and said, and Wilson, that's it. I said, yeah. That's what we came out to see. The heads are like smaller than I expected.
Yeah, it's not
that
as
Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's not that big. And of course, the strange thing about it is, okay, that was built with public funds. Yeah. All right. Why them?
Yeah.
Was that ever put to a vote or anything like that? I can't believe so. I believe there was some sort of a committee that went with that. And, how well do these symbols endure over time? Definitely our view of Thomas Jefferson now is not what it used to be. Same thing I think also of Teddy Roosevelt. It's not what it used to be.
Well, the thing that you think is a lot different from Teddy Roosevelt?
Yeah, I think it's definitely changed. Yeah.
Well, the thing about Jefferson is, at one time people couldn't stand him because of his political beliefs.
Yeah.
And then later on, people despised him because of what he was doing in the bedroom.
Yeah, his personal life.
And most people nowadays don't even know what he did politically. He knew about his personal life.
Probably don't. Yeah.
And back then, they didn't know about his personal life. They knew about his political life.
Right.
He's kind of flipped on that. But yeah, I don't know what those four guys are doing up there, because you're thinking, well, you put the really four important people. Okay, maybe I don't know, John Tyler, James Buchanan,
I mean, I could think of putting Hamilton up there.
Yeah.
I mean, there's these. If you're going to have a symbol of bedrock, shouldn't the people represented on that bedrock be the fucking bedrock? Atoms. Yeah, it's these were ultimately they were politicians. They put up there. Yeah, did they serve with distinction? Of course they did, but I've always thought it was a very weird monument in that way. Hey, I wanted to ask you something here. He makes a pretty powerful statement here on page 488. Second paragraph.
Oh yeah, I have that circled, that page.
The principles of liberalism can have a real existence only in conjunction with the police system.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Do you buy that? Because I can think of history that disputes that. And history not even that far back. Okay, modern American cities did not really have a police force until about 1850. Didn't exist. We definitely had, a classical liberal political system and economy up until that point. There's other ways to rule. It doesn't necessarily have to have a police system. Now, maybe a modern liberal experience has to have a police system, maybe just because of the size of the cities. You can't get around that. But I still thought that was, a bold statement, from 1925, where you don't have to look that far back in history. Australia basically was without a police system up until like 1900. So, and even look at England. Yes, you have a police system, but the powers of the police were severely limited. They actually sort of let the street gangs sort of police themselves, to work out a lot of the stuff. Unless that was a capital crime, the police generally wouldn't get involved. It wasn't worth it. Unless someone owed money or damaged property, then they would get involved. But all the other disputes, things, involving fidelity and things like that, they didn't get involved.
I agree with you about that.
So that just that sort of popped out at me.
I just underlined next paragraph.
Yeah.
In Spain, the classic country of backwardism, which I think is a great word.
That is.
The anarcho-syndicalist.
Yeah, say that 3 times and throw up.
You actually did that in Scrabble?
Yeah, that's right. 600 points.
Speaking of which, I've met these Scrabble fanatics. You don't dare ever do anything outside the dictionary.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep.
You've met him, huh?
I have. I've played against them.
Okay, we're really repeating the policy of the Russian Mensheviks. Okay, look on the bottom. No matter how the Spanish Revolution develops, they'll at least put an end to anarchism once and for all. I'm thinking, he knew it was coming up. That right there says the same shit's going, that he's fearing is going to. What do you think?
I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you.
They're going, God, well, they could really, Crusader.
Yeah.
But I think he's over and over again. If the reader picks up, gets into it, is just trying to keep this shit from happening. That finger in the dike.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost sometimes I get this feeling like, well, I'm going to decree it's this way, so that way it can't represent itself again, which of course is not true. The anarchist movement in Russia, when it came back from the Soviet Union, was very strong. It was very, very strong. Had a lot to do with Yeltsin being able to maintain power, oddly enough. There was a big movement on the streets like, no, this is, we'll take another dictator, but we'll take a weak dictator this time. And Yeltsin understood that. Actually did a pretty good job at the transition. Yeah, it became, horribly corrupt in terms of business meddling and stuff like that. And they ripped the West off to billions and billions of dollars, to improve the country and things like that. But he understood, to let that vibe remain. It was a necessary outlet from the repression of the last 70 years. So anarchism and the Russian experience is an interesting, dim side of the coin to the desire for dictatorship. Maybe those two are tied together. Maybe there's such a strong feeling within people that, well, if we don't have the strong dictator, the anarchists will express themselves regularly, as they did often in the 1700s, 1800s, going right up until the Russian Revolution. Well, that just popped into my head. I'm not saying I got evidence for that exactly, but it's a possibility. That's good you pointed that out. This was a very action-packed page here.
I mean, but we know the end of the Spanish Revolution.
Yeah.
What happened, and sometimes read these books going, oh yeah, I'm not saying to be like Nostradamus. Like you've seen some of the faulty reasoning he had in certain patents. One before this one too, right?
Yeah.
You didn't quite agree with.
Yeah, there's some errors in here.
But you could see stuff. And anarchism just has no definite anarchism, but his thing is like anarchism is not just breaking stuff, but what you do now.
Exactly. It doesn't allow for proper organization of the state. That's the real issue about it. It's I think very much a human desire, not to be policed, within the expression of your life, and that works if you're, dispersed. You don't really have any property, and there's less than 150 of you. You can have a pretty anarchistic situation. It doesn't matter. But as soon as you try to organize into some sort of a structure, you have to have boundaries.
Then you have that, what I think is one of the most horrendous things I see in American history is that, at least in my lifetime, is that little WTO, all that melee that happened up there.
Yeah, up in Seattle.
Because we're going to break the windows out of these people, we're going to get the Starbucks and McDonald's thinking, we're going to put them on these people's heads, man.
All you did was make Starbucks and McDonald's a little more expensive. That's all.
That's what it was.
Because the insurance companies paid off, and now there are no more Starbucks and McDonald's. It's the same thing with the Rodney King riots.
Yeah.
All they did, those neighborhoods hurt themselves. Yeah, if you have an understanding of our system, the system does everything it can to insulate property owners from acts of violence. Homeowners insurance, someone sets fire to your house, they'll fucking pay. They will pay. You set fire to your house, they probably won't. Unless it's an accident. But I've always found that, very interesting how, they're incredible. For as much as I dislike the insurance industry, and they are predatory, they are an amazing shield for one and only one thing, and that's property rights. So, yeah, we're going to keep you, and your properties you've invested in, we're going to keep you whole. And how absolutely crucial that is to capitalism. You cannot undo capitalism unless you would undo personal property rights, and of course that isn't going to happen. So what you do is you drift towards a more socialist model, where you can protect those that are not going to have access towards owning a house. Hey, buddy.
This is like we're out in nature and we're getting really interested about rights and everything. Also, they kind of has to come up.
Yeah, it's okay.
Well, I do agree with you about that.
Yeah.
Because it keeps this whole thing. Because I've read these magazines like National Rock and Roll, and back when the Tunes is open. Yeah, we want to go out and do all that stuff. I'm thinking, I get equal. You're going to get your donuts. Damn, if you have me, I don't know. I got a lot of history of things I've done in my head and outwardly, which is my sarcasm. I never had an inclination to go break windows.
No.
I did one time. I threw a rock because the train was going by. I threw a rock. I said, I'll rock it up. I said, what the hell is this shit? Breaking car windows. I never had. I don't think you and I never had such an organized force, man.
No.
You and I have a.
Glad you're enjoying it. Seems kind of homoerotic to me. Hey, shower with your buddy, man. It's cool. cool.
The famous ethnic guy, like all these black guys don't take a huddle, or don't look like it's all over each other.
Yeah,
He goes,
totally.
"Can I buy you lunch?"
Yeah.
But
Well, Victor Victoria, that was absolutely beautiful because Alex Karras, comes out as a gay guy within football, which, oh, by the way, the NFL just hated him for that. He's like, yeah, there's lots of gay guys in the NFL. Why do you think we joined? Why do people join the Navy?
600 guys on the boat, nothing ever happened.
Yeah, that's right.
Back then, men were all more honorable.
Yeah, that's right.
1943.
And I'm sure they didn't like it.
Did you know one of the things about Trotsky one time? He said, "I didn't know that first spark."
Yeah.
Because he's mentioned it to possibly, come on, Trotsky. Chris is going, well, I must give another speech.
Yeah. Another conference, perhaps. I'll assume a little more power. I'll share a little power, and then all the while they know that a big part of the country doesn't speak English. We don't know what's going on with that. We have a war effort that we really have no control over, and then there's the fucking Bolsheviks that are controlling the factory system. So their heads are in a cloud, man, in a haze, absolutely. And they kind of knew it. I love this, talking about the fall of Riga. The attacks were delayed because Japanese cartridges had been supplied for Russian rifles.
Let me see here.
How the hell does that happen?
I wrote something in here too. Anyway, I don't want to keep what you're saying.
Yeah, just that sort of inefficiency and the observation by John Reed, the American journalism,
Yeah,
that the oligarchs, were actually more happy. The possessing classes of Russia preferred a German victory to a triumph of the revolution.
Yeah.
Wow. That was pretty shocking to me.
Why? What was the biggest shock to you?
Well, you don't want the Germans running your shit. Come on. They're very good at what they do, but let them do it.
I analyzed something about that whole thing. I wrote something down. You see, you in your fifth hour history class. Yeah, nothing.
John, I'm buying you a highlighter. Okay, I am buying you a highlighter.
Oh, here it is.
Okay.
Page 481.
Okay.
Second paragraph. On the third day of the opening of the conference, the Puritan Portuguese paper account how Zianco got this plan to road the rifle stocks to Spain, 1936. I wrote that out.
Totally. That's the shit they were selling them later. Oh my gosh. Oh. Yeah, that was I that totally popped into my head too. I was like, wait a minute, this stuff was still around 30 years later. No wonder they got involved. Someone had to sell that off.
Oh man.
And but Rod Zianco himself too, with his thundering bass, ponderous and pretentious, seemed as he stood on the tribune rather a living monument of the past than a political figure. Yeah, the characters involved are interesting, and the I think that subtext of desire for a dictatorship and the inability, to rally the forces to provide that. The Zion gates are open, for the Bolsheviks to come in, no doubt about it.
I think you may have already read this out loud. This is on page 496.
Okay.
During his journeys on the front, relates General Tomsky, Trotsky would often pump up his courage and discuss with the Canadians the question of creating a firm power, forming a directory, or turning out the power to a dictator. I'm thinking,
Yeah.
I had earmarked that one.
Yeah.
I just think, you know what? If you didn't know the plot, of this. Would you? Well, I don't want to even think it's gonna. I mean,
Well, it's almost cartoonish. Yeah. I mean, if you really think about it, it is. It's almost cartoonish. It's so bizarre. It's not at all, not at all would events like this or these sort of characters play out in any other, revolutionary environment. And he makes a good point of that, how different this is compared to like Bonaparte and the French Revolution. How maybe Kerensky's looking at Bonaparte as maybe a figure that he wants to emulate, but there's no way that it's going to fly, because what the French Revolution did was really a kind of a unique revolution that other Western powers thought, well, wow, we're going to fall into that category, but none of them really did, because the administration, the bourgeoisie, they didn't get run out. All they really ran out was the monarchy, and then very quickly, Bonaparte stepped into that power vacuum, and France had a primer with the Sun King Louis XIV, who declared throughout his entire reign that he was the state, that he was the embodiment of the state, and the French people kind of took to that, because he'd lived a long time. There was enough of indoctrination that stuck. So when Bonaparte comes along, you have this disillusion. Well, of course, bureaucracy keeps going. Checks are still being written. Trash is getting picked up. All the things the state has to do. It's just now, okay. Well, here's the new embodiment of the Sun King, for Bonaparte. That was never ever the case in England. All right. It was also never ever the case in Germany. Of course, Italy didn't even really exist. Spain had a feudal monarchy. You know what I'm saying? It's, I think too many Western powers looked at that. So, well, this is for us, including America, even though nobody ever truly emulated it, including the Russians.
Could I have been copied?
Could it have been copied?
Yeah, because the question is about that kind of thing. It's about the French Revolution, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You said who's going to take the second stone, and the other countries just didn't. But I think France had it so badly that against the wall. When Michelle Gatton used to hang out in her husband, we would talk about this stuff, and she wrote a book about how Abigail Adams talked about. She went out in the streets, she was horrified. Well, John kept on drinking, voyage back and forth. The French just couldn't take it anymore.
Well, it was hyper-industrialized. There was that's another thing that you always think of, like, well, England was the big industrial engine. No, it wasn't. It was France. France was way ahead, because France had the people, was able to feed the people, and France was able to create these large cities, and that changed something very radically within the French demographic. Okay, French provincial tradition, women wouldn't even date until their late 20s. The way to keep the population under control. The village wasn't going to have too many kids. They already had a really good history of that, about an 800-year history of, the villages would grow carefully in a small way. Well, Louis XIV comes in, recognizes that, either we become a modern state or we get overrun and chopped up. It's the same thing, France isn't as homogeneous as we like to think. So he starts putting incentives out there, come to the cities and work. Number one incentives, women can come unaccompanied.
That was major.
That was a major. So women that didn't really feel like they had a position in the village, they didn't like it, maybe attracted to the glitz and glamour, they pour in the cities. They're having kids at 16. So all of a sudden, you have the cities, and you have the population just mushrooms. That's good in a way, because you have all this cheap labor, to make stuff happen. Make French goods, French Navy, don't forget, that was a very significant Navy at the time. It was up there with Spain and England. So they're able to capitalize on all this cheap labor, but they can't feed them. That's the big problem. Why? Because France is exporting its food to pay for the fucking expansion of the country. France was a major food exporter to, guess where? England. It had a smaller population. So.
A few years ago, we had Christmas time, we have a different theme every year at the house, because you were there for one Thanksgiving. Seth said he's gonna make first and English breakfast.
Oh God.
Oh. You brought it with him?
A more disgusting plate of crap could not be served in front of me.
He went to the Springs and found it. It's some kind of foreign food market.
Yeah.
He's good at that kind of stuff. I told him one day what he put some vegetables. You know, he brought the bottle onto the house here. Everything I wanted, he got it from me. I'm thinking, but no, yeah, he bought the smashers. Oh man, no one could eat them, man. No one could eat that meat. No one could eat the bread, nothing.
No, it's disgusting. It's disgusting. Fucking beans. You know, flavorless baked beans. I don't even know how you make them that flavorless. You know, specially designed.
If you have two countries, how far apart is England and France?
11 miles or 21 miles, yeah. But it's a world apart.
France eating there? I mean, how big can you? I mean,
I'll never forget. I rode a train from London to Dover. I was getting on the ferry. There was a very interesting elderly lady who'd lived, through World War II, and she's telling me about the Blitz and the bombing of England. We just had a good conversation, And she said, you know what really, and she was also going to go over to France, and she said, you know what I find really, really appalling about the French, and I thought, well, the fact that I don't take regular showers. She said, the food.
Yeah, because you're not used to it, right?
No, because it's just for her it was just an assault on the senses. It's all these gravies and eat a lot of birds and things like that. The English are as invested into their culinary tradition as like the Italians are, and they're really invested.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Italians are like, as far as they're concerned, there is no other food they're interested in eating. Like when you're in Tuscany, you can't find like any other restaurant. It's all Italian food, and it's all basically the same. In any deviation, like, oh no, you can't put garlic on pizza. It can't be done. I got so burned out on that food when I was there. I was so burned out when I had it.
How long was that?
Well, when I was over there for 6 months. When I closed my business, I was 3 months in Germany and 3 months in Italy because I was working on getting my German citizenship, which I thought I was entitled to. All the signposts said I was entitled to, but Germany changed their eligibility requirements right after I closed, and they didn't tell me. So they let me go down the path. I spent hundreds of dollars trying to do this, and then I had to pay to find out what the rejection letter was. So German. I was pissed. I was fucking pissed.
Sometimes as an American, if you understand other countries, I will never understand certain countries. I can kind of get a feel for it, maybe. I don't care, man. There's certain ways to do things. I just don't.
Yeah.
Like
Well, you can't if you're not living it. How can you know it? It's even as hard as we've worked to try to understand the Russian psyche, and I think we understand more than most Americans. We're still on the outside looking in.
Always will be.
Always will be.
Because at the one time, I'm taking the train back, and the end of that one grew out at the first. Please, go back 5 miles an hour because they wouldn't let the Red Cross come in.
Yeah.
Put in track, and does that still carry on, that kind of thing, or is it kind of a lot different now?
I'm gonna say